A dim street lamp pierces the thick London fog in November 1978. On Waterloo Bridge stands a man, waiting for a bus. He feels a slight prick in his thigh, as if accidentally brushed by an umbrella in a crowd. The stranger politely apologizes and dissolves into the gray mist. A few days later, the life of this man, a well-known dissident, ends in a hospital bed. Doctors are bewildered, for on his body there is only a tiny mark concealing a microscopic capsule with a rare toxin. It was a triumph of the old school, where every step was meticulously planned over months of surveillance, and the perpetrator had to approach within arm's length, feeling the scent of perfume and the warmth of their target's breath. In that era, physical presence was an absolute law, and the risk of exposure hung heavy over the operative. However, today, almost 50 years later, the rules of the game have changed beyond recognition. Umbrella guns and poisons in rings have been replaced by invisible lines of program code and algorithms capable of delivering a final verdict from another continent. We are entering an era where the hunt for a human has transformed into a sterile mathematical problem, and the role of executioner has been passed to silent neural networks. The transition from classical 20th century espionage to modern technological methods did not happen overnight. It was a slow but relentless transformation, beginning with the development of computing power and global positioning systems. In the middle of the last century, eliminating a key figure required an entire army of specialists: analysts, a surveillance team, logistics experts, and finally, the perpetrator himself. Every link in this chain was vulnerable. Every person could make a mistake or succumb to emotions. The modern world has shed this human fragility, replacing it with the cold calculation of servers. Today, the information field around each of us is so dense that concealing one's location becomes an almost impossible task. We voluntarily leave digital footprints that turn into perfect tools for those seeking ways to end someone else's activity. Smartphones, smartwatches, facial recognition systems, and financial transactions form a detailed profile that artificial intelligence analyzes in fractions of a second, identifying vulnerabilities that once took years of painstaking work by field agents to discover. The external appearance of this conflict today looks like a confrontation between technology and privacy. During the Cold War, the main efforts were focused on physical penetration and the creation of secret communication channels. The world's intelligence agencies used complex ciphers and invisible inks, and the elimination of undesirables required a theatrical production to conceal the true cause of the target's earthly demise. Today, however, cyberspace has become the main arena. Software, such as well-known next-generation surveillance systems, allows for complete control over a target's device without a single click from the user. The camera and microphone become the eyes and ears of the pursuer, and the movement history becomes a roadmap for a future strike. The use of autonomous drones has added a new, frightening dynamic to this process. Now, to conclude an object's biography, there is no need to send a capture team. A small device equipped with a pattern recognition system is sufficient, capable of circling in the sky for hours, waiting for the ideal moment when the target is within reach. These machines know no fatigue, fear, or doubt. They merely execute the algorithm embedded within them. However, behind the facade of technological perfection lies a deep internal conflict among those who manage these processes. In the 20th century, the liquidator was a professional whose work demanded nerves of steel and a readiness for direct contact. It was a job that left deep scars on the psyche, for the executor saw the face of the one whose life he was ending. There was a certain code, albeit brutal yet human. The modern digital assassin is an operator sitting in an air-conditioned office thousands of kilometers from the scene. Before him is only a grainy image on a monitor and a thermal trace, resembling a blob in a computer game. Such distancing creates a dangerous illusion of impunity and ease. Psychologists note that the absence of direct visual and physical contact lowers the moral threshold for decision-making. When the termination of another person's life cycle is reduced to pressing a button on a joystick, the very concept of the value of life begins to blur. The personal ambitions and fears of past operatives have been replaced by the professional detachment of technocrats, for whom mission success is measured by the efficiency percentages of an algorithm, not by the complexity of the operation performed. The ideological clash in this sphere touches upon the very essence of human civilization and legal norms. Previously, any such action was considered an emergency, requiring political approval at the highest level. There were systems of checks and balances, for failure meant an international scandal. Artificial intelligence introduces an element of automation into this system that frightens philosophers and lawyers. If the decision to liquidate is made by a machine based on big data analysis, then who bears responsibility for a possible error? We face a paradox. Striving for ideal accuracy and minimizing collateral damage, humanity creates systems that deprive us of control over the most important choices. The philosophical conflict here lies in the struggle between efficiency and ethics. Algorithms optimize the process, making it fast and cheap, but they are unable to understand context, show mercy, or assess the long-term consequences of their actions. This turns the hunt for people into an endless cycle of calculations, where each individual is merely a set of data to be processed. The real turning point in the perception of these processes occurred with the advent of the "one" concept. This technology allows artificial intelligence to predict a target's behavior based on their past actions. If surveillance agents previously tried to understand where a person would go tomorrow, now the neural network knows this with 98% probability. It analyzes when you drink coffee, which routes you take to work, and with whom you communicate on social networks. When the algorithm notices a deviation from the usual rhythm, it signals a possible threat or an ideal opportunity for intervention. This turns the modern world into a transparent aquarium, where the walls are built of data. The moment of transformation came when machines learned not just to follow a target, but to act proactively. This changed the very strategy of elimination. Now there is no need to seize the moment, it can be engineered. Technologies allow for manipulating the reality around the target, creating conditions under which the outcome becomes an inevitable consequence of the logic of events, rather than a random coincidence. The culmination of this evolution was the creation of fully autonomous hunting systems. Imagine a swarm of tiny drones, each no bigger than a palm. They coordinate their actions with each other without human intervention, exchanging data in real time. One drone detects the target, a second blocks escape routes, and a third performs the main task. At this point, all narrative threads converge. The cold calculation of the Cold War, the technological breakthrough of the early 21st century, and modern advances in machine vision. This is the ideal embodiment of the concept of an invisible pursuer. There is no room for negotiation, no opportunity for maneuver. The system operates as a single organism, driven by a single purpose. In such a confrontation, humans have no chance, as the machine's reaction speed is thousands of times greater than the biological capabilities of our brain. This is the triumph of pure function over form. where the result is guaranteed by software that has undergone millions of training cycles on virtual proving grounds. The resonance of these changes echoes in all spheres of our modern life. What began as a tool for a narrow circle of special services gradually penetrates the civilian space. Methods used to search for and neutralize dangerous individuals are now applied to corporate espionage, political pressure, and social control. We must understand that technologies have no moral compass. They merely reflect the intentions of those who create and use them. The lesson we can learn from this story is that progress inevitably deprives us of privacy, demanding questionable security in return. In a world where an algorithm can pass judgment, humanity becomes the most scarce resource. We stand on the threshold of a future where every step we take is recorded and analyzed, and any mistake can be literally fatal. This is not just a change in intelligence methods, it is a fundamental shift in the relationship between the state, technology, and the individual. Concluding this immersion into the world of digital shadows, we inevitably return to that very bridge in London in the late 70s. That umbrella seems like a child's toy today, an artifact from a distant and almost naive past. Back then, the world seemed complex but understandable. There was an enemy, there was a hero, and there was direct contact. Today, the enemy can be a line in a database, and the hero, a software code launched on a server on the other side of the world. The hunt continues, but it has become quieter, faster, and incomparably more effective. We no longer fear the prick of an umbrella in the fog, but perhaps we should begin to fear a notification on a smartphone screen or a quiet hum in the sky overhead. The world has changed forever, transforming the art of elimination into a precise science where there is simply no room for error. And in this new reality, the most important thing is not to lose, amidst a string of zeros and ones, the understanding that behind every digital profile stands a living person whose life is priceless, no matter how perfect the algorithms striving to end it. If we consider the economic side of this issue, the maintenance of vast states of operational employees demanded colossal budgets. In the mid-20th century, a single elimination operation could cost millions of dollars in equivalent of that time, taking into account logistics, the creation of false identities, and the rental of safe houses worldwide. Nowadays, costs have shifted towards software development. Code written once can be used an infinite number of times against thousands of different targets. This makes the process massive and accessible. If political elimination was once the exclusive prerogative of superpowers, today such technologies can fall into the hands of private corporations, or even small groups possessing sufficient computing power. The democratization of tools of persecution is perhaps the most alarming aspect of modernity. The line between state justice and private retribution is becoming increasingly transparent, and algorithms make no distinction between a legitimate order and an external request. It is interesting to trace how the very appearance of the target has changed. In the era of classical espionage, it was a person possessing secrets or political weight. Today, anyone who creates noise in the information system can become a target. It is enough to have a certain influence in the digital space, or simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time to fall into the field of view of monitoring systems. Artificial intelligence does not seek ideological enemies, it seeks anomalies. If your behavior does not fit within the given security parameters, you automatically become an object of interest. This creates an atmosphere of universal suspicion, where each of us is under constant, albeit invisible, aim. Modern liquidation does not begin with a shot. but with the inclusion of your name in a list of potential threats, after which the machine slowly and methodically tightens the ring, depriving you of resources, connections, and, ultimately, security. The internal dynamics of modern systems are striking in their complexity. Neural networks are trained on vast arrays of data, including records of phone conversations, videos from street cameras, and even heart rate data from fitness trackers. All of this combines into a single picture, where a person's biological reactions reveal their intentions before they even realize them themselves. Fear, excitement, an attempt to hide, all of this has its digital signatures, which the machine recognizes unerringly. This is the main paradox. In trying to protect ourselves from technology, we use the very same technologies, thereby only immersing ourselves deeper into the control system. Old methods of disguise, such as makeup or fake documents, no longer work against retinal scanners and gate algorithms. A person's identity has become their main vulnerability, which cannot be hidden or changed. Reflecting on the future, we can assume that physical elimination as such may even recede into the background. In an era when a person's entire life is tied to digital services, social liquidation can prove to be much more effective. Blocking accounts, removal from all databases, annulment of digital signatures and medical insurance transform an individual into a living ghost, deprived of the ability to exist in modern society. This is a more elegant, sterile, and less noisy way of terminating an object's active activity. We return to the idea that information is the most powerful force, capable of both giving and taking life. And those who hold the keys to these databases become the new arbiters of fate, operating in the shadow of server racks. Thus, the history of hunting humans has come full circle. From ancient personal duels through the complex intrigues of the 20th century to the absolute automation of the 21st. We have witnessed how human will is gradually supplanted by algorithmic logic. And although the methods have become visually less bloody, their essence remains the same: control and elimination of obstacles in the path of those in power. We can only hope that in this arms race between the human spirit and machine intelligence, there will remain a place for those values that cannot be digitized: compassion, honor, and everyone's right to their own, albeit imperfect, private life. For ultimately, no program, however perfect, should have the right to put an end to the human journey, which began long before the first computer and must continue despite any algorithms. Each new generation of technology brings with it the illusion that we have become safer. But in reality, we are simply exchanging one set of risks for another. Hunters of the past could err, could show weakness or even empathy for their victim. History records instances where an executioner, at the last moment, refused to carry out an assignment, seeing not a target, but a human being before them. In the world of artificial intelligence, such failures are excluded. A machine knows no doubt. It will not see a family man or a talented scientist in its sights. For it is merely target number 7842 with specified neutralization parameters. This loss of the human factor makes the modern era of Liquidation 2.0 the coldest and most impartial in history. And perhaps it is precisely in this that its main danger lies. In a world without emotions, justice turns into a mathematical equation that does not always have the right solution for humanity itself. Finally, it is worth considering how this transparency of the world affects our own behavior. Knowing that we are being watched, we begin to self-censor, trying to conform to a safe pattern of life. we voluntarily limit our freedom so as not to arouse suspicion in an invisible judge. This is the highest form of control, where the very expectation of possible impact becomes a tool of governance. Liquidation, in such a case, occurs within consciousness itself, killing initiative and originality before they even have a chance to manifest. The world of the future is not necessarily a battlefield of drones. It can be a quiet room where every person fears taking an extra step, knowing that millions of electronic eyes are watching them, ready at any moment to signal action. Past and future have collided at a point where technology has become inseparable from our biological existence. And if before we could run and hide, now there is nowhere to run, for we carry the pursuer in our own pocket. But even in this digital fortress, there remains room for reflection. We are the creators of these systems, and it is within our power to set the rules by which they will operate. History is not yet written, and its ending depends on whether we can maintain control over the tools we created for our own protection, but which can so easily turn into instruments of our own disappearance.